What's up, everybody? It's Glenn back with Big Jack for another best bets of the NFL weekend video. It is week 11 in the NFL season. It is moving by quickly. With that being said, our records are looking pretty good for being 11 week or 10 weeks into the season, going on 11 weeks. Jack had a 1-2 week last week, but he's still got a strong record overall at 17-13 overall. And I had a good week last week. I had one push, and my other two games were wins. So I went 2-0-1 last week, moved my record to 17-9-4 overall in the season. Big Jack, those are some good records. If our fans aren't loving us now, they never will. What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, honestly, we've been pretty solid over the course of time that we've been throwing these out there for the past 3 years or so now. But yeah, collectively, I feel like this is probably our most consistent year.
Oh, for sure.
You've been just solid all year. I started off slow and then was hot, and then have sort of just been fairly steady until last week with that little bit of a step back with the 1 and 2, but more than halfway through the season, both sitting at pretty decent clips as we move along. Just gotta keep building on what we've been doing and finding the right plays, baby.
Yeah, it's been what 3 years that we've been doing this, I think, Jack, and I love that this has been the year we've been most consistent with our videos, getting them out on time, getting the people what they want. But over those 3 years, you've been awesome. The last 2 years, I was pretty bad. Maybe it's been newer to sports gambling, maybe riding the public a little bit more, and the that first glance at a board and going with your gut where I think a true gambler has to look at it objectively, and I feel like I'm starting to kind of learn that a little bit. Um, but yeah, this year it's been solid. You started, like you said, you started out pretty poor first 2 weeks, but since then you've been on fire, and I've been pretty solid all year. So no, it's been great. But that being said, we're only 10 weeks into the season. There's 8 weeks left. We want to finish strong. We want to build on these records. We don't want to get too ahead of ourselves. So with that being said, let's maybe get into our picks this week. Um, so there's been a question the last couple weeks from you, Glenn. What's your records on over unders? What are they? And I haven't had that number ready for you. Well, I have that this week, and I'm going to start with an over under. So far this year, I'm at 17-9-4 record. I have 9 picks of over under games. I'm 6-3. So
The fact that you have 4 pushes is sort of
it's a lot
wild.
of pushes. It's crazy.
I mean,
Um,
we picked 3 games a week, and to have 30 picks in, and you got 4 pushes. I feel like that's sort of remarkable.
now that with that being said, I'm gonna look at a team total over. It's something different than I've done all year. It's been the game over unders is what I've been doing. I'm looking at a team total over. I'm looking at the Dallas Cowboys going to Carolina, and the number I'm seeing is 26 and a half. Um, I believe they've only not hit that number once this year, and maybe that's a sucker mentality. But they seem to be kind of a front running team. They like to really pour it on their opponents. They've only had one close win this year. I think they beat the Chargers by a field goal. But other than that, all their wins are like 17 points plus. They put up some big numbers. The Carolina secondary is okay. They do have a decent pass defense, but I think the Cowboys for sure score at least 27. Over 26 and a half for the Dallas team total is my first pick of the week.
Interesting. Yeah, you sort of before we started, jumped on officially, you sort of mentioned that you had a unique pick up your sleeve this week. That's certainly a different one. Wasn't quite what I was expecting. I was more so thinking along the lines of maybe a first half play or like a true player prop or something. But yeah, that's interesting. I can't argue with the logic at all. It actually I wasn't going to throw this out as my first pick, but I'll just go to it now because we're on the game. Um, I am going to take the Panthers at home plus 10.5.
Wow.
Kind of like you just said, the Cowboys have absolutely mollywopped everyone they've played, except for when they lost to the Cardinals, when they got blitzed by the 49ers. Then they had that tight game against the Eagles, tight win against the Chargers. But other than that Chargers win, just like you mentioned, every other win is just a bloodbath. They blow teams out of the water. I think a lot of people look at that and say the Panthers are the worst team in the league by a decent margin. And they look at it and think, Cowboys once again coming off a massive blowout last Sunday night against the Giants in a national spot. Everyone got to see it. Or no, it wasn't Sunday night. Excuse
Thursday.
me. It was the America's game of the week in the afternoon.
Oh yeah, yeah.
But anyway, regardless, national spot for them. Um, and I think people are just sort of feeling that vibe of if the Cowboys are going to win, they're going to kill them because that's held true all season. And I think this week, I certainly don't see a way where the Panthers pull off the double-digit outright win. But I really like them to compete, and I'll take that 10 and a hook.
Yeah, it's a big number, and honestly, Jack, that's your thought process on what the public's going to be thinking is where I saw myself going at first was like that 10.5 number. The Cowboys are going to win by 24. They like to blow their opponents out. So for your sake, for my sake, because I tell you, I hope that you're right with your logic that that's what the public's thinking. Give me 10 in the hook with the home team. Um, I will say Carolina, they're they're a team that they're not going to give up. They have no incentive to tank. They're trying to improve.
Mhm.
They are in some games. It wouldn't shock me if they cover that 10.5 number. I like the thought process there, Jay. All right, my second pick of the week. I know you like the Vikings, but I'm going the Denver Broncos minus 2.5 versus the Vikings this week. I believe it's Sunday Night Football. It's at Mile High. Yes, these are actually two of arguably the hottest teams in the NFL in recent weeks.
Mhm.
Um, Broncos with wins over the Bills and the Chiefs. Vikings, I think, with 5 wins in a row or something along those lines. Um, I like
Might
them
even
to
be
have.
six.
Is it 6 in a row at this point? It's
I,
a.
I, s- I said it might be because I can't remember if
Did they
they.
start
I
all in
know they
four?
started their first like two or three. They lost them all in those like last,
Yeah.
basically the very end of the game. That they had chances, but they lost every single one of them. And then I don't know if they've rattled off six in a row or if there was a gap in
Right.
one of them. But yeah, at least five in a
At
row for
least
sure.
5. I saw 5 for sure. Um, that being said, they're on a nice streak. I think Kevin O'Connell is a good coach. I think Brian Flores is doing some good things with their defense. I think overall they're a good team, but I actually kind of like what the Broncos are doing too. I think Sean Payton's got Russ
Yeah.
playing the way he should be playing in the way that we can come to expect of Russ before that big trade. Their defense is playing better in recent weeks. I like Denver at home. It's only 2.5 points. I think they cover versus the Vikings. It could be a competitive game, but only 2.5. Give me the Broncos.
I like that pick quite a bit. I was made the mistake of being against the Vikings for the first time all year last
Yeah.
week. I sort of thought that, they were going to be riding that high, but I didn't know if that magic bus was going to keep on moving, but it did, man. I mean, they got off to such a big lead. The Saints made a little bit of noise down the stretch when they pulled Carr and put Jameis out there. But yeah, I like you said, I really like the way the Broncos are going. Uh, unfortunately, it was sort of at our expense as Bears fans. They seem to really be riding the momentum of that comeback.
Yeah.
They give up 70 some points in Miami, just an absolute embarrassment. A record setting day on the negative side of things for them. They come into Chicago, they're getting smacked around. Bears are up 21, and then all of a sudden the switch got flipped, and they've sort of been rolling ever since. That defense has been like weirdly stout ever since. And Mile High's a tough place to play. I'm not gonna go against the Vikings again. I won't dive into that bag 2 weeks in a row, but I do think that that's a pretty sound pick going on the road in a Mile High. I'm going to move on to the early slate. I'm going to take this, excuse me, I almost said Cincinnati as I'm looking up at the score of this Ravens Bengals game. I'm going to take the Browns, the Cleveland Browns at home. It's a very similar situation to that Bucks game I was on last week. It's -1 on the board, but the money line's only -115. I'll take, I'll lay the one. We always play the number, but you could probably take that money line if you wanted to. Either way, I like the Browns to win. I know they got that unfortunate news with Deshaun Watson being out for the rest of the year. Pretty amazing that he played the way he did in the second half of that Ravens comeback, now knowing what was going on with his arm and everything else. So, um, you know, you could have a lot of, opinions about his character and whatnot, but he started to look like the Deshaun Watson of old on the football field in the second half of last week. And it was, I'm sure a lot of people in Cleveland were excited about that and now sort of feel like they got their hearts ripped out. And I just think that a lot of people look at that team, they're probably going to start DTR. I don't know if they've officially announced that yet. They may
They did.
have at this
They
point.
did, I think.
They did.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I just think that their defense is so good.
So good.
They already played Steelers earlier in the year. They lost. It was a weird game where I think the Steelers had two defensive touchdowns. I don't know. I don't know if you catch those kind of breaks again in that matchup. I think people look at it as a game where it's basically a pick 'em, two 6-3 teams in the division. One of them is going to be with a rookie quarterback who looked horrible. He looked good in the preseason, but he looked horrible in the actual NFL game, the actual regular season game he played. Um, so I think that's like a tasty, attractive Steelers pick for a lot of people. And I like that Cleveland defense to just not let the Steelers defense do anything. I feel like a lot of times when a certain player on one side of the ball goes down, it kind of fires up the other side to kind of, get that mentality of like, all right, this is on us to kind of step our shit up and make sure we take care of business. I think the uh, Browns defense will do that and they get the win. And dude, the Steelers, once again, last week outgained by the Packers and they win the game. It's 9 games in a row. They've been outgained and they're 6-3. It's just got to break eventually. They can't keep going their way, and I think this is the week that they catch an L on that.
You like the Browns, man. You love defense at your core. I know you talk quarterbacks a lot of time, but you love defense, my brother. Uh, I'm interested in the game. I don't think I like either side. I'm interested in the game though. I will say that. All right, last pick of the week for me. I do feel like this is maybe a little bit of a sucker side of a bet, but I'm gonna go Chargers -3 at Green Bay. I've gone against Green Bay a few times this year. In the past, it's hurt me, and this year seems to be working a little bit better. Um, I just I think Chargers got more firepower than the Packers. I think that Chargers pass rush put some pressure on Love. I think that Chargers offense has the ability to score some points against that Green Bay defense, although they are pretty tough. Chargers -3 at Lambeau. I think it's just better team. Only 3 points is kind of what I'm thinking there, and that's where I worry about the sucker bet. But that's my logic in the pick.
I mean, yeah, the Chargers offense was absolutely rolling last week. Unfortunately, they just got a little behind the 8 ball too early, and the defense couldn't really give them much of anything to give them a chance. But they scored touchdowns on their last 5 straight possessions. You got to think that means they probably found something. I don't know. Herbert hasn't been having his best year, but last week he looked like the quarterback that I think a lot of people believe that he will be long term. I think he's a stud personally.
Oh, absolutely.
But yeah, I like that pick. Like you said, a little bit of square vibes,
Yeah, square
maybe,
is the word I was looking for.
but yeah, the Packers stink, man. I don't know. It's
And it's just like one of
that
those
would
games where it's like if the Chargers are going to make the playoffs, you got to go. You got to beat Green Bay. You got to take care of business, right? And Green Bay, they only
yeah,
got 2 wins on the year, I think. Um, I like the Chargers there. We'll see.
yeah. No, that's a good point. This point of the season is, as Thanksgiving's right around the corner, it's really starting to get to that like nitty gritty of you better. you better figure it out because that hourglass is sand is starting to drift away of whether or not you're going to be a playoff team. So yeah, I do think that's a good call on the motivation factor of like, all right, we got to go get a W this weekend. My last pick, I'm going to turn to a team that is I think is still a contender. I'm thinking that this is a team who, excuse me, who has been disappointing to this season. They're still 5-4, barely above 500. I do think that they're going to be similar to how the Bengals have been in years past, where at this point in the year they start to turn it on and never look back. It's the Buffalo Bills. I'm going to take
Oh,
them. I'm going to take them -7 at home against the Jets. Obviously, we know what just happened. They fired their offensive coordinator. Um, seems like not the right fall guy. Their offensive numbers are pretty solid, but it's looked clunky at times. Josh Allen's obviously turning the ball over at an alarming rate. Maybe alarming's a little too heavy of a word just because he has turned it over his whole career. But it's been bad and needs to get better if they're going to have any chance to win some games. I think it starts this week. I think that's sort of maybe not the most fair shakeup for Dorsey, unfortunately, but sometimes those things can kind of go in your favor as a ball club. And I think that, it sort of brings the guys together, refocuses the group. Now we're going into their 10th game of the year, similar to what you were just saying about the Chargers. It's really crunch time, especially with their upcoming schedule. They sort of have a gauntlet ahead of them. So they can't really afford to drop games. I know they lost to the Jets in New York on opening night, even when Rodgers went out, basically on like the second play of the game. Um, so the Jets probably got some good mojo with that defense heading out there, but I just think the Bills come to play. Uh, and it's 7 straight up right now. You're actually getting a pretty good odds on it. I got it -105. So I love that play this week. I think the Bills just sort of blow them out of the stadium. I think it's at least a 17-point win. So I'm hoping it's just a zero sweat.
yeah, man. Real quick on Ken Dorsey, I think I agree with your sentiment that I think it's the wrong guy to be firing. I'm not saying he's some game changing offensive coordinator necessarily, but their numbers are pretty good. And last week, if you're just looking at last week's game, in crunch time, he called like a great drive down the stretch with everyone's thinking pass plays, and he runs like nothing but runs. And
Yeah.
it seemed like a weird time to fire him. I know they're probably feeling a ton of pressure up there, expecting to be a Super Bowl contender with a 5-4 record coming up against a gauntlet of a schedule. But I just don't know if he was the guy. All right. Anyways, quick recap. Uh, I am on the Chargers -3 at Green Bay, Denver -2.5 at home versus Minnesota, and the Dallas team total over 26.5 at Carolina. I will say if you could find 27.5, I'm fine with that too. My book is either 26.5 or 28.5. I went with 26.5. Cost me a little bit, but that's where I went. Jack is on Carolina +10.5, Cleveland -1 versus Pittsburgh at home, and Buffalo -7 versus the New York Jets. The parlay's in play. All 6 legs. We'll see what ends up happening. Um, if you guys are new here, like and subscribe. We drop Bears talk videos as well, and then also just general like random sports chat / NFL draft / whatever we want to talk about videos. So like and subscribe, get involved. Big Jack, anything for the fans one last time?
Nah, man, let's go out there, have a good week. I need to bounce back from a disappointment in week 10, and you just got to keep doing your thing, man.
Hell yeah, hell yeah. All right, give it to him one time.
Bears.